Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to a wonderful Wednesday webinar with the Climate Emergency Centre Network, an ever-growing network of eco and community centres across the UK. Tonight, we've got the honour of having Ellen Clifford come to speak, who is the author, as part of a long-term campaign group I've known of called Disabled People Against Cuts, that's DPAC. We met originally around Occupy time, and she's the author of an incredible book, The War on Disabled People, and it would be great if people could get a copy of that, circulate it, network it. And she's going to be talking tonight about welfare, not warfare, and about a book and, you know, the full-on information about what's going on and the situation at the moment. I heard her speak at the Climate for Change, We Demand Change Summit. Very good. So, Ellen, thank you very much for coming. Let me hand over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Phoenix. Yeah, I want to start by thanking Phoenix and Mary Ellen from DPAC for helping me get here tonight. I kind of live with severe and enduring mental distress, and getting anywhere, even online, isn't always easy for me. But it's really important that we're doing whatever we can at the moment to try and fight back against the escalating attacks from this government against disabled people. Hopefully I'll say something useful on that for you. I'm sure Polly and Anne Pridmore could do this better than me. But yeah, I mean, it's a terrifying time at the moment for disabled people. The two main things I'm going to talk about, but it's not limited to these by any means, are the disability benefit cuts that have been announced in the Green Paper and the Spring statement by Rachel Reeves. Also, at the same time, we've got going through Parliament an attempt to pass legislation which would legalise what we tend to in the disabled people's movement refer to as assisted suicide, because that's I think more popularly it's called assisted dying, but we call it assisted suicide because that's the particular method that this bill is legalizing, where the person takes the drugs themselves. I don't think I've been involved at a time when people have been as scared as people are at the moment. I think that it's more important than ever that we are talking to allies, but also looking after each other, and also thinking of all the ways we possibly can to stand up to this government and say that we are not going to accept this. I don't think the majority of people in society want to live in a society that attacks the poorest and most disadvantaged people. I also think in terms of the assisted suicide bill that there is quite a lot of misinformation out there, and also just people generally have never had a chance to really think about it and actually understand what it means and what is being legalized. So I'm going to try and cover both of those topics, but there's a lot in there, and like I say, these aren't the only things that are going on. There's also been changes, for example, to or the government is trying to change things around special educational needs to stop families being able to take local authorities to court, essentially just letting local authorities get away with not providing learning support for disabled pupils and treating disabled pupils as if they are the problem. A whole host of things. Social care is still in crisis because of the privatisation of social care support. There are increasing numbers of scandals involving abuse. There was one exposed by ITV, I think this week, with horrific treatment of people with learning disabilities living in their services. The staff get minimum wage, and the CEOs at the top are on just huge, obscene salaries. So everything in every area of disabled people's lives, basically, we've been under attack since 2010. So I'm just going to start with some slides. I'm just going to put the context quickly of where these attacks by Labour, what the situation is that they're coming into. So the context. So we've had a decade and a half of austerity and welfare reform, and disabled people have been disproportionately impacted by both of those, which is why Disabled People Against Cuts, why we first set up was to oppose those disproportionate impacts, because disabled people are more reliant on public services and of course the social security system. It meant that by making cuts to all those services and restricting eligibility and making the social security system much more brutal and punitive, it had a disproportionate impact on us, to the extent that the United Nations in 2016 made a finding of grave and systematic violations of deaf and disabled people's rights due to austerity and welfare reform. And that was the findings from an unprecedented special inquiry that the United Nations Disability Committee carried out after the co-founders of DPAC, Linda Burnett and Debbie Jolly, triggered the committee to use the optional protocol of the Convention on the Rights of Disabled People to investigate the UK. We had a follow-up on that last year, and they found that no significant progress had been made in implementing the recommendations from the report. And in fact, they found that there have been areas of further regression since 2016. Key areas for that further regression were in terms of social security for disabled people and social care system. Local authorities have been in crisis since all of the cuts that started in 2010. That situation hasn't changed. Disabled people are waiting for social care assessments. They are being reviewed and further cuts being imposed. People are having to make choices about whether they use their social care to wash or to eat or to take their medication. Many disabled people can no longer leave their homes. There was also a swathe of attacks that the Sunak government announced in April 2024. They were attacks on disabled people's social security. And at the time, I remember many commentators had the idea that if there was a general election, that those announcements that they made would never get to be implemented. But the Tories got to work immediately on implementing them, and the Labour government came in and has continued many of them. So, for example, in-work conditionality is being rolled out, and that's where people who are in work but are judged by the DWP not to be earning enough money or to be working enough hours are made to look for more work on top of doing their hours of paid work in their existing jobs. And many disabled workers face barriers to being able to do that, to put the extra time into looking for jobs, or they may not even be able to take on any more work for reasons of disablement, but people are getting sanctioned if they don't do that. 27% of those impacted by in-work conditionality are disabled people. There's also the migration from legacy benefits to universal credit happening. Lots of disabled people are disadvantaged by that process. The government refused, both the Tories and now Labour, refused to consider automatic migration. People actually have to apply to go onto universal credit, otherwise they will just lose their benefits. And that's obviously deliberate to try and lose people in the system. And it's very worrying, the idea that people without support to apply for universal credit are just being left with nothing. So Labour really came in where the Tories left off. They picked up what the Tories were doing, and they have tried to not only carry on with it, but they have now ramped up and escalated those attacks on social security. And they're doing it at a depth and a scale that the Tories never ever attempted. And
Wow.
that is very upsetting for lots of people. I wasn't surprised, but I am taken aback by just the speed they're trying to do this. They're trying to get it through quickly so that the opposition to it can't have such an impact, and the cruelty of it is just on another level. When you've got Tories coming out and saying that Labour's being cruel, then you know something really, really bad is happening.
Wow.
So the green paper that came out, Pathways to Work, it's called, um, there's a lot of misinformation happening. The figures that have been reported in the media and promoted by the Labour government are not what we would consider the true scale of the cuts to be, in that the on paper cut is over £9 billion. The figures they're talking about in the media, and when politicians are talking about this, they're talking about a cut of 4.8 billion. The reason for the difference is that the Office for Budget Responsibility has made some calculations that not all of the cuts will actually happen, because there could be what they're calling behaviour change. Not actually, interestingly, not due to people finding employment and getting jobs, which the government is saying this is all about, but due to things like disabled people trying harder to score more points in our benefit assessments, to assessors being more generous as well, because they know that if they don't score a certain number of points, people are going to lose all their benefits. I'd really like to see, and I haven't found, I don't know if anyone else has, any information on how these calculations were made, but what the general public and most people would understand as being the level of the cut is over £9 billion. They're also talking about 250,000 households being pushed into poverty as a result of all of the cuts. Again, that's not the true figure. It turns out that they have been factoring in, this is quite complicated, but they've been factoring in the changes to the work capability assessment that never went ahead, didn't go ahead because of a legal challenge against the consultation for those changes that I took. Had those changes gone ahead, 150,000 households would have been pushed into poverty. Those changes never went ahead, but that figure has been factored in somehow. So Labour is saying because those changes aren't going ahead, they've saved 150,000 households from poverty. Therefore, they're deducting that number from the total number of households. And in any event, this figure is based on the 4.8 billion in cuts, not the 9 billion. I know this is quite technical, but I suppose the key point is that the public and MPs are being given misinformation about the scale and depth of these cuts. These are terrifying when we look at the size of it, and that's why we have to do as much as we can to stop them. I'm quickly going to go through different figures on different aspects, because the media is talking all about the PIP cuts, but it's not just the PIP cuts. There are lots of other things in the Green Paper as well. So with the freezing of out of work disability benefits, freezing the amount they're paid out, that's going to impact over 3 million families. So this is all on top of that's on top of the PIP cuts. With PIP, again, misinformation. The government is talking about 800,000 people losing their PIP daily living component. So PIP there's two parts to PIP. One is for mobility and one is for daily living. It's the daily living bit that they're trying to change. They're saying if a claimant doesn't score 4 points in at least one area that they test through the assessment in your daily living support needs, then you won't be entitled to it. Lots of people make the points up through scoring lower in quite a lot of different areas, but they're saying you have to score 4. They're saying only 800,000 people across the UK will lose out on that. But this is after the OBR's accounting for these behaviour changes that may never even happen. I actually think it's very difficult to reach 4 points for people with certain certain support needs, for example, people living with mental distress. So I don't know how they've calculated 800,000, but the total number of people who will be impacted is actually 1.5 million. And of course, even if you don't end up with the cut, you've still had to go through the reassessment. You've still got the stress and the trauma of those grueling, harrowing assessment processes, which actually we know moves us further away from employment because of the anxiety and the stress that they cause. And then I don't even think it's just 1.5 million, because, say, for example, I got 4 points in one area of daily living. But we know how the assessment process works, how difficult it is, how they're out to catch you out. So I'm scared that I'm going to lose mine, because who's to say that if I go through reassessment, I'll still score 4 points in that area? It's so random. So the people who are going to be affected by this is even wider than that. There are plans to change the universal credit rates. They're going to raise the standard allowance, which is equivalent to job seekers, which is really good. They should have done that a long time ago. But what they're also going to do is halve the top up that disabled people who've been found unfit for work get. And that's going to affect 2.25 million current universal credit recipients, and they reckon 730,000 future recipients. This again is all on top of those PIP losses. They're also planning to get rid of the work capability assessment. Now, this is actually a plan they've taken straight from the Tories white paper in March 2023. They're going to abolish the work capability assessment and instead make eligibility for out of work disability benefits dependent on eligibility for PIP. So if you lose your PIP, then you could well end up, through this proposal, also losing your out of work disability benefits. The government and the OBR haven't given a figure for how many people will be impacted by this. Apparently, the government gave the OBR too little information for them to be able to get a scoring on that. But I saw something yesterday, I can't remember which, I think it was a think tank or a charity. They're reckoning this could be around 230,000, I think. But this information is all going in information papers that we'll put on the DPAC website, and I'll make sure that that is up to date with how many is estimated through, estimated because we don't have the information from the government at this time. They're also planning to merge contributions-based JSA and contributions-based ESA, that's Employment Support Allowance, and they're going to time limit the awards for those. So anyone who's on contributions-based ESA is going to have to apply for income-based if they are eligible. I'm not sure if they've publicized numbers they think will be affected by that, but I found that there are currently 404, or as at August 2024, there were 445,599 claimants on contributions-based ESA. So they will all need to reapply for universal credit. So that's sort of what we do know, although it's very complicated and nothing's clear. But there's also lots of things we don't know at all. We don't at this stage know the total numbers who would be pushed into poverty through the on-paper cut of the 9 billion. And we don't have breakdowns for all of the proposals that are in that green paper. There's lots and lots of missing information, and MPs are going to be expected to vote on this very quickly. They're also saying that the PIP cuts might just go through. They can go through without needing to be voted on. And I reckon that probably is going to happen. For the other things in the green paper that need to go through primary legislation, MPs are going to be voting on those without having the full information. So, for example, there is no scoring at the moment of the employment outcomes that will result from all of these cuts. And whenever the government are justifying this, I don't know if anyone saw Starmer being questioned by the disability cuts mini inquiry that's been set up. He was being questioned by Debbie Abrahams, who's a great ally of disabled people. She was clearly furious, questioning him yesterday. The only thing he would talk about is how people need to be helped into work, but there's no employment outcomes that have been published. The OBR say they're not going to be able to work that out until October ahead of the autumn budget, but MPs will be voting on this a lot earlier than that. They're saying in the Green Paper they'll invest £1 billion in employment support. This employment support is going to be targeted for people who are officially unfit for work. So I'm not sure that that's a particularly good use of money. I think it's just going to cause a lot of stress and distress for people. We don't know how many people will actually be pushed out of work by the benefit cuts, because 1 in 6 people on PIP are in employment, and many say that without that extra income for support with, for example, day-to-day support, they're going to be pushed out of employment. All increased mental distress moves us further from employment. And then I think there's going to be a knock-on in the wider economy. If people are losing their daily living amount from PIP, then it's going to mean that people can't pay for support, that support hours will be reduced. There's also questions about the impact on the economy, in that everything disabled people get in our social security payments basically goes out again, because we need it to pay for essentials. I mean, increasingly people are using PIP to pay for essentials nowadays. It should be the extra costs of disability, but we need it to pay our bills. Scope estimates that's estimated that the spending power of disabled people and our families is actually, I think, around 58% of total retail sales. So that's something that people are wondering about. And then the big thing is the additional impact on public services, and whether there will be additional cost pressures put on those services because of people having cuts to money we use for essential support, particularly social care support. People will be applying and trying to get more social care support as a result. There'll be more people in poverty, there'll be more homelessness, and mental health services, the demands on that will grow considerably. But there hasn't been any accounting for that. There's also, I thought of this the other day, the amount that local authorities will be able to charge for social care services will go down, because DLA and personal independence payment, PIP, is now taken into account when local authorities work out how much they can charge people. They count it as income within your financial assessment. And so when they assess people for social care charging, there's an amount set by government, which is the minimum amount you're legally allowed people, you're allowed to leave people with to live on. And it's too low an amount anyway. But if you reduce income from DLA/PIP, then the amount that local authorities can steal from people to pay for social care services is also going to go down. There's so many consequences to all of these things that I really don't think have been thought through at all. So that's just quickly going through the disability benefit cuts, and I think just those numbers show to people just the devastating impact it's going to have on disabled people, but also our families, our loved ones, our communities. I think it's going to also potentially break our public services because of the additional pressures that it's going to put on them. I think it's quite horrendous. That's why disabled people have been coming out in such big numbers, the protests that we've had recently have been called out at very short notice, but people have turned up for them because people understand just what kind of impact these are going to have, and we can't let them have happen. As I say, May time, we think the PIP cuts may be pushed through because those don't need to be voted on. I think we need to create such an opposition and resistance to these that the government has to do a U-turn on it.
So that is
Starmer
that,
is,
Ellen, is that
yeah,
May next year?
no, May this year.
May this year they're pushing it through. Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, that's great.
terrifying.
Oh.
Starmer is arrogant and doesn't like changing things, doing U-turns, and neither does Reeves. We saw with the winter fuel payments.
Mm.
For example. So this is a hard ask, but I don't think it's impossible. I think by targeting particularly uh, MPs who have come out and are supporting these cuts, and the ones with small majorities, I think that there has been a miscalculation on the part of Labour. I think this is being done. There's no economic need to do this, I should have said, because welfare spending itself is not going up. It's lower than it was a decade ago, and it's not forecast to rise over the next 5 years. It is the proportion of welfare spend that goes on disability benefits that is going up. But there are reasons for that, such as COVID, such as more people having to leave work because of mental distress, because working conditions are getting so bad for people. And disability prevalence just is rising, and that's a fact that the government needs to get to grips with. But economically, welfare spend is not going up. The other thing I should say, of course, is they raised the state pension age. So people who previously would have been under the pension budget heading are now under out of work disability benefits. So there's not an economic need to do it. It's purely performative, I think. I think they think it's going to make them more popular. The day after my legal challenge judgment was handed down, Starmer was in The Sun boasting how he had the balls to be ruthless about cutting disability benefits.
Oh, what a terrible man.
Just disgusting. So, but I think they're wrong. I think that, well, I think polls have shown that the majority of public are not in favour of these cuts, and that's even based on the misinformation and the lower numbers. So we've really got to try and get these bigger numbers out. Have spoken to the National Union of Journalists. Their president, their outgoing national president, is a deaf activist, and they she's going to put together hopefully just a quick, easy guide to how to make complaints. I think if we can start making complaints every time a newspaper reports on the misleading figures, for example, and there's lots of people who do lots of very valuable activism without being able to come out to protests, and this would be another thing that people can be involved in if people have the time and energy. It's just whatever people can contribute. I think we need to make sure that Labour realises that they will be punished for this if they go ahead with it. The problem is obviously we want them to realise it before these cuts get implemented and cause devastation, and that's why we're just trying to really mobilise as quickly as we can. Have I got time to talk about?
Yeah, keep
Yep.
going. You've got another 5, 10 if you want it, 10 minutes.
Okay.
And
Cool.
and then we'll take questions and answers, folks. You
I'm
can,
just
or
gonna
feedback. Hmm.
go through the terminally ill adults end of life bill situation quickly, because that's something that disabled people are really worried about, but we don't get as much wider support on this question, because it's not as well understood. I think lots of people in our experience tend to see the idea of assisted dying as an issue of choice, and kind of see a link between it and being pro-choice in terms of abortion. The disabled people's movement has always been very pro-choice, um, but we don't think that assisted dying will give us choice. What we think it's going to do is reduce choice and reduce the choice to live for many people. Terminally ill people are by definition disabled people as well. It's not you can't easily draw any distinction between terminal illness and disability. So that's one piece of misinformation that the sponsors of this bill have been putting out. Kim led, is it, I always get, I never know how to pronounce her name. Ledbetter. She's repeatedly said the bill doesn't affect disabled people, which shows firstly a complete misunderstanding of the definition of disability, in that people with terminal illness are legally count as disabled people, but also you just cannot draw a clear line. So for example, people with neurodegenerative conditions, this bill will apply to them. It's being pushed through as a private members bill, which means that there is not what we think needs to be, that the scrutiny isn't there. Private members bills aren't subject to the Equality Act, so that means they
What?
don't have, say?
What? They're not. Wow, they're not subject to
No, because it's
equality.
Parliament, and Parliament is exempt from the Equalities Act. So I think this is quite deliberate. Um, it means that they didn't need to make a statement of compatibility with human rights when it was introduced to Parliament. It means that they have no duty in terms of reasonable adjustments for disabled people to be able to engage with it. And it's gone through at just one hell of a speed. We were expecting the report stage to be on the 25th of April. That's now been pushed back to the 16th of May. And I think that's because the bill sponsors have realised that there are many MPs who might think they're in favour of the principle, but are concerned about the speed it's gone through. But having extra time at this stage really doesn't make a difference, because it's already gone through committee stage. And that means that there's no realistic chance of any major amendments to what is already in the bill. And what is in the bill is dangerous. They watered down the safeguards throughout committee process, which again went through at one hell of a speed. They were meeting 2 days a week for the last couple of months. And so keeping up with that is really, really difficult for disabled people. And another myth is that this isn't about pain. At the second reading debate, MPs in favour of this legislation were talking in their contributions. They all used stories, and they used stories about people dying in pain. And of course, disabled people wouldn't wish anyone to die in pain. There are a number of palliative care consultants involved in the campaign against this bill. They say that though there will always be cases of people dying in pain, mostly those will be through unplanned deaths and accidents, and that people should just never reach that stage. People with terminal illness who are members of DPAC talk about the advanced directives that they've got, whereby they have chosen that if they get to a certain stage, they will be given sedatives which will hasten their deaths. And that is possible, and that is actually legal. In Oregon, where assisted dying is legal, only 1/3 of people choose this because of pain. Most people choose it because they're worried about being a burden, or because of not being able to do the same things they used to do before, and loss of autonomy. During the committee stage, they took evidence from witnesses. The witnesses were obviously heavily biased in favour of those who support assisted dying, because the whole committee process was just really stacked in favour of the pro lobby. Doctors, physicians from jurisdictions where it's legal, many were saying people want it as an option when they're newly diagnosed, because they're frightened that they might get to a stage where they feel pain and don't end up taking in Australia, I think people are given the medication, the drugs to kill themselves, and they take it away and they choose when they take it. And it's not a nice process. Anywhere this happens, the drugs have really bad safety. Um, um, they don't meet really stringent safety requirements, that the drugs that are given. It's not a nice thing. But they say people don't always use them because they never reach that stage. So my question would be, well, if people, shouldn't people be getting good support when they're diagnosed? DPAC members who are in the situation talk about the importance of peer support, talk about the importance of psychological support to be able to get used to what is happening to you, so that you can live out your life without prematurely terminating it because you're frightened of something that actually probably isn't going to happen. Disabled people's main fears about this, and I should say, we are pretty certain that if this comes in, it will very soon be expanded. So at the moment, the bill eligibility criteria is if you have a prognosis of 6 months left to live. And we know how difficult it is to make an accurate prognosis. I think the DWP released figures that 1 in 5 benefit claimants who have 6 months, who are given a prognosis of 6 months or less, are actually still alive 3 years later. So it's not an an accurate marker at all, but the eligibility is 6 months at the moment in the bill. But there are already people complaining that they wouldn't be eligible and wanting it expanded. And the lobby behind this bill, Dignity in Dying, they are massively powerful, massively wealthy, and massively determined. And there are legal routes. Senior barristers have spoken about the legal routes that could be used as a way to expand this, and these people are fanatical about this, and they will, if this becomes law, they will find a way to expand it, and they will make that happen as quickly as possible. Dignity in Dying actually started out as something called the Voluntary Euthanasia Society, I think, and they're eugenicists, essentially. There is eugenics behind this. We are worried about that expansion, but we're not allowed to talk about that, by the way. If we try and talk to MPs about the possibility of expansion, they shut us down because the sponsors of the bill have said there's no way it can happen. That's what they say publicly. We know they know it can be.
That link to the eugenics thing you just mentioned, that is one of the most powerful things to say and to bring up.
We're not allowed to use the word eugenics when we talk to Labour MPs because it puts them off, apparently.
Use it anyway.
Well, this is coming from Labour MPs who support us and are totally opposed to it. It's been terrible. Trying to lobby MPs on this has been horrible. Because it's going through as a private member's bill, it's going through on top of all their other work. And they're really not giving it attention. And it is quite complex, I suppose, for them. Like, they don't understand what disability is to start with. A lot of them are very naive and I don't think they think that there are people who have these, these agendas. And they've sort of gaslit us because everyone thinks Kim Ledbetter is this lovely woman because her sister was murdered, and she's bouncy and bubbly and she's so nice, and so they trust her when she says things like this doesn't affect disabled people and it can't be expanded. And they think that we are scaremongering. They think we're hysterical disabled people that don't know what we're talking about. This has been the hardest campaigning I've ever been involved in, because it all comes down to their votes, and it's trying to reach people that, I mean, a lot of them have a fair amount of contempt for to begin with. And we have to try and find ways to get them to listen. It's really horrible. But even just within the parameters of the bill itself, very worried that disabled people who reach that stage of being eligible will face medical coercion, because we know that happens. Disabled people don't have equal access to health services. Look at COVID, look at not just during COVID, but disabled people have always had an experience of having to fight against do not resuscitate notices and judgments on quality of life from the medical profession. So we think, well, who are they going to raise it with? They're going to raise it with us. And people, particularly if you've got internalized depression, you can be at risk from feeling pressured
Mhm.
into things, even if the doctor just raises it and they're not trying to pressure you, you could still feel that. The
Uh,
gender impacts are really, really concerning. If you look at places where it's legal and restricted to terminal illness, like Oregon, for example, it's disproportionately women and older women. If you look at the assisted suicides of people with anorexia, which because of this diagnosis, which is now prevalent, of terminal anorexia, um, that people can be granted assisted suicide if they're anorexic, not just in countries where it's legal for people to have it if they're disabled, but also where terminal illness is legal. All the anorexia assisted suicides are young women. We know that already in this country it is very common for mental health trusts to put young women, once they get to 25 and they've got severe anorexia and have had it for a number of years, they put them against their wishes onto palliative care pathways and stop giving them treatment to live. So the idea that we've already got that horrific situation, you then throw assisted suicide into this, and young women with anorexia will be eligible for this in this country. And that's just, I don't want to live in a society where that is something that happens and that they think is it acceptable. The bill committee know all this. Their reaction is, oh well, a few young women with anorexia, what's that, like it. Yeah, it's a price worth paying is basically the attitude of the pro MPs on the committee.
Ellen, somebody, I think, well, Mary Ellen was telling me that in Canada they're offering either homeless people or people who can't pay their rent
Yeah.
assisted dying, which is, some of the slippery slope that's been mentioned. I mean, you guys really know your facts and your information, and when it's presented in the way it does, shift people's perspectives. But are they offering assisted dying to people who are homeless who can't pay their rent in Canada? Is that?
Yeah, so that's the next point. Yeah, really, we think that people are gonna opt for this because they don't have the support they need. Social care services is a big thing in this country, within just the parameters of the bill that's being presented to us at the moment. There was a case, a woman in Portsmouth. I was in touch with her, and her friends crowdfunded for social care support for her because she was had a neurodegenerative condition. She was nearing death. She had muscular dystrophy, so she'd lost, the ability to move independently, to speak, and she was losing the ability to breathe. And they had to crowdfund for social care support for her. And the woman, she'd been a great campaigner in her life. She was a Greenham Common and so on.
Mm.
She was obviously like a really awesome person. Um, and she just politically she agrees with us, but she was just feeling at the end of her life she was thinking it's something that she wanted, and that was because of the lack of support that she was getting, things that she was legally entitled to. So we say it's not about choice. With the slippery slope, by the way, the bill committee refused to hear any evidence from Canada because they decided it was completely irrelevant, that we will never get to that stage here, which is just nonsense, of course. And Canada is really frightening because of it being offered, yes, to people who are homeless. It will be the ostensible reason, the official reason will be the impairment that they've got, the disability they've got. But really the reason why people are seeking it is for homelessness and for poverty and for lack of social care
Mm.
services. And
Um,
apparently, I heard a statistic, I don't know the source of it, but that 28% of people in Canada now think that people being given assistance to kill themselves is an appropriate, even desirable response to poverty. And I think
Wow.
that what is terrifying is that I think that once something like this becomes legal, it becomes normalized, and then people's attitudes start to shift in line with what they think is normal.
Acceptable or normal, or yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
if you look at the Netherlands and
Um,
Belgium, disabled children are euthanized.
wow.
People with mental distress. I've looked at um, research papers for assisted suicides that have been given to people with personality disorder labels. Predominantly, it's women with the diagnosis or the medical label of borderline personality disorder, and none of them have had access to effective evidence-based treatment or therapy.
Mm.
It,
Ellen, just to say, we're probably in the last 15 minutes, don't mind carrying on for 20, but there's a few comments in the chat. If
yeah,
you want to say whatever else you want to say, but
yeah,
maybe we should have
yeah.
some
Sorry
questions,
for that. I
feedback.
can just talk
No, you're
about both these
brilliant.
subjects
You're
for hours.
absolutely brilliant. You know your information and you are powerful in your speaking. Carry on, do your tail end bit. We'll go for some
Yeah, I'll
questions.
just finish on the amendments that were voted down at the committee stage, and I think what you see fighting on both these fronts at the same time is it's really difficult, but we have to be, because we have to make MPs find ways to make MPs aware of what happened at committee stage, I think, because the amendments that were voted down are really telling about the agenda of the people behind this bill, I think. So there was an amendment that was put in that originally I think came from me, because I'm very worried about people choosing this because they feel like a burden, because that's something a lot of people with internalized depression feel. So the idea was to restrict eligibility for people choosing assisted suicide because they feel like a burden. That was voted down. The restricting eligibility from people who are choosing it because they're worried about finances, and what they pass on to their children, for example, that was voted down. Restricting it from people who are homeless or prisoners, that was voted down. It was also voted down the idea that doctors shouldn't be allowed to raise it with children. And children aren't even eligible under the current parameters of the bill. So why do they need to be able to raise it with children? I find that really
Mhm.
creepy. That was voted down. The people behind this are fanatical about I,
Well,
about this as a solution to what they see as suffering.
I did find a link there. The Canary, which is a very good
Yeah,
alternate media, came out of Occupy movement there to the assisted dying campaign.
yeah,
And they're
they've been
linked to
really good on
eugenics.
this.
I'll have to read it afterwards, but I
Dignity in
posted
dying,
there.
they looked at where they get their money from as well, I
Yeah,
think.
and there's a eugenics link or something. Ellen, you absolutely know your stuff back to front. That's incredible. Thank you very much for some of that. Maybe we should get some,
Yep,
if folks want to do
let me
questions,
stop
they can
sharing.
be, yeah, cool, cool. Down the bottom, there is a little heart. And if you go in there, there is a raise or lower your hand so we can see when Ellen stops sharing the screen who's one,
No,
two,
I've done it,
three.
I've done it.
I just got one. So if you, it could be a feedback, it could be a comment, it could be a question. If you raise or lower your hand there down the bottom, do a little heart-shaped react down the bottom. But first up, I've got a question there and a bit of feedback. Is as a campaigner and activist, I now know the timescale. It's and the voting again in May. But what can we do? Is there going to the DPAC website? Is there easy letters that can be sent to certain MPs? There's a group called MP Watch, and they've been targeting MPs who deny climate, and they know who's got the thin majority. So you were mentioning about pressuring ones that have got a thinner majority. So I'm really surprised that there's no impact assessment before they vote on this. But what can we as activists do? Is there a way to go to the DPAC website and cut and copy letters and turn out for these demos? So let people know, and we'll try and network that. And thank you so much. That was really powerful. I feel a lot more informed and brilliant. So yeah, what can we do? Would be a question then over to Andrea and then Dottie and anyone else. Put your hand up, feedback, comment over. Ellen, what can we do? How can we help?
Yeah, so I'm in in the middle. I have paused for this important meeting of putting some stuff on the DPAC website. There are lots of other allied organisations like Inclusion London and the Peace and Justice project who have done template letters, and there are links. So I'm going to do a page on the website that links to those, but also put up information briefings that people can use as the basis for their own letters. Writing to MPs, I think some of them have been so deluged they've got to the point of not reading them, but that's not a bad thing, because it shows the strength of feeling, and sometimes they, you know, they do literally count down how many letters they get on an issue, and that indicates to them strength of feeling. What we have found, though, is that meeting where people are able to get a face-to-face meeting, and it is increasingly difficult to do so, it can be really powerful to have those conversations. There are quite a lot of these the MPs are very worried about this. I got to meet an MP last week. It was my best mate's MP. She organised a meeting with her, and she said, "But we can't, you know, we can't just be taking Pip away with nothing else there," which shows her naivety, because of course that's exactly what they are. They are planning, but I think getting to MPs anyway, you can, and then and joining the protests. Similar for the assisted suicide stuff, letting them know the information that they probably don't know.
Okay, that's great. Andrea and then Dottie. Thanks, Ellen. To unmute, Andrea.
Thank you, Ellen. Thanks so much. Yeah, so where are you? I've lost you.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm getting dark.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't find you. Anyway, the question was about PIP, and so how it's going to affect people who are quote unquote unfit to work. And then you just said that they're taking it away completely. Is that planned? And is that one of the things that they are planning to do in May?
So I think probably in May they're going to try and push through the changes to PIP they want. The changes that in order to be eligible for the daily living component, you have to score at least 4 points in at least one area. Does that make sense?
So, sure, but does that mean that everybody's going to be reassessed in May or before
No,
May?
no. It will just go through Parliament in May. So then the idea is that over the next couple of years they reassess everybody. They'll target people that they think will no longer be eligible, basically.
Yeah, yeah. And you said something about OBR and behaviour or something or other, and I didn't understand what that meant at all. OBR and behaviour issues.
Yeah. So they have
Sorry,
said,
what's the OBR?
oh, sorry.
Right,
The Office for Budget Responsibility.
right.
And so they're the ones that do the impact assessments regarding impact on costs and savings to
Yeah,
the economy.
yeah.
And they have said they think that although 1.5 million disabled people will be reassessed
Mm,
because they haven't got 4 points in any area of daily living, they think that only 800,000 will end up with a cut. They think that there might be things such as claimants trying harder to get 4 points in one area, or assessors becoming more generous to make sure you get over the threshold to get the benefit. But my question is, how have they worked? Like, what assumptions is that based on? How have they calculated that?
mm-hmm.
But it's helping people. It's helping disguise the true level of the cut, or the true level of the people who are going to be impacted.
Understood.
And then what you said about the combination. So if you lose, so what they're going to do, they're planning to do, is to get rid of the work capability assessment completely. Once that they'll have to pass a law for that first. They're planning to get rid of it, and then you will only get your out of work disability benefits. It's now it'll become a universal credit health element instead of what it is now, the LCWRA component. You'll only get that if you get PIP.
Okay. I think Dottie's got a question there, then Mary Ellen, and then Jules. Dottie 1, Mary Ellen 2.
Thank you, Ellen. Mary Ellen, sorry.
Yeah, I guess I'm just sort of thinking about, yeah, I mean, like, what is the underlying rationale about why pick on people with disability benefits in the first place? Because it's never been explained to me why it is that this particular group of people is going to provide the best savings for the UK economy. I can understand Rachel Reeves and so on are like, oh, we've got to like try and save money or find some more money, but it seems like it's the most convoluted and likely to back, is this because they think that disabled people or people who are on benefits aren't going to complain, or do they really have no other options? That's what I find like very
They're vulnerable. It's easy.
Yeah, I think part of it is that they think that they can get away with more against us because disability isn't very well understood. We're not in positions of power. We're very marginalised from society. So I think they think it's easier to get away with. I think they think it's popular because of all this narrative of benefit scroungers. And I think that number 10 has a characterization of the kind of people they think they need to get votes from. I think they deliberately tried to target the white working class vote, like in the red wall constituencies, etc., to get elected. And like you can see with their policies on things like immigration and how they are tagging to the right. I think they think that this is the way to stop reform from growing, is to try and yeah. I think they think, but what's interesting is that it's doing the opposite. It's pushing votes towards reform. There are lots of disabled people who haven't had a chance political education, and they think they have that idea of Farage as an anti-establishment figure. We've had people writing to DPAC saying we need to, contact Nigel, and a Guardian poll the other day showed that among disabled people, reform was leading by like 16 points over any other party. So they're achieving the complete opposite of what I think they think they're going to do. I think also there's a problem with their kind of economic theory as well.
I always question their polls sometimes. I wonder who pays for these things. And
yeah, it was a Guardian poll.
And they're always consulting house dwellers who not everyone. Yeah.
Well, no, I think that is true, but I do think that they're playing an extremely dangerous game.
Mary, should we come Mary Ellen and then Jules?
Yeah, can we put the light on? Hold on, yes.
All right, yeah. Mary Ellen, thank you so much for linking this one up. It's been a really informative, and let's all network this one when it's out to share with lots of people. And anything you can do to support the DPAC crew, they are frontline. Love and respect. Big up, Mary Ellen. Mary Ellen, over to you. Comment, feedback, question. I know you got a lot to share. Over, and then Jules.
Thank you, and thank you.
You're muted again. Hold on. Unmute.
Unmute. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, we got you loud and clear.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much, Ellen. As always, so phenomenally knowledgeable and so good at being able to get us all to understand what's going on. Thank you. And thank you, Phoenix, for helping Ellen to keep on track and remind her what all we need to be talking about. Not that she needed much of that. One of the things you talked about, Ellen, was about the impact on the economy and the cuts and services. One thing that we haven't mentioned, and I think is worth mentioning, is the change in NICs, employer NICs, as of this week. The employer NICs were 13.8% on everything above £758. From the 6th of April, that's going up to 15% on everything above £417. So people will, on a much lower earning, their employers will now have to be paying 15%. And that's going to impact so much on smaller employers as well. And businesses cannot carry that kind of weight and will fold. And there will be job losses, and there will be people who need to become benefit claimants. And no one's talking about this. They're talking about what they want us to focus on is fraud levels and scroungers and people who are just not working enough and not trying hard enough. Well, what about these people who are going to be laid off, these businesses that are going to collapse? What impact is it going to have on the economy? We really need to get this message out there, because this is about, as you said in your talk last week, this is about all of us, not just existing claimants, but future claimants. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mary Ellen. Buddha wisdom as always from the Daisy Lotus petals. Jules Zaklovska, over.
Yes, Sakalska, hi. I also wanted to thank you, Ellen, so much. It's impressive how much knowledge you have been able to acquire. And yeah, I wanted to say two things. One, I am currently in a position where my Labour Council is trying to evict me via Section 21 that the Labour Party is also currently trying to abolish. And I am disabled myself, and also I know there are other disabled people. So I volunteer my services if you need a case study or, you know, anyone to really like shit on Labour, so to speak. I'm very happy to do that. And also we are meeting with our MP Bel Ribro Adi on Friday about this, but I also wanted to mention something about the cuts. I know she has already wrote a piece, an article for, I think, politics.co.uk, where she opposed this very publicly, even tweeted about it, which she wanted to do for our campaign. So that's like a step up. But I'm wondering, what else can I ask of her at that meeting? Like some actionable thing that she can do to, I don't know, make some waves, at least create a viral moment, like something. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, it'd be good to be in touch. There are some questions that it would be really good to get MPs to be asking if they can, because you know you can clip it from Parliament TV and then share that, like stuff to expose the stuff that they're not telling people about the true scale of it and that. So if it's all right to have your contact details, then I can send you a list of those questions for her. I think a really important thing is to thank the ones that have come out against the cuts and give them some appreciation for that, because we want a lot more to do that, because we need to get a rebellion. I'm sorry what you're going through though.
So I just wanted to say that, yeah, I mean, I'm sorry to hear your situation. I'm actually in the same situation. Me and my partner are both disabled. I'm getting incapacity for work. My partner gets PIP and incapacity for work, and we're also facing eviction. So there's like, it's not just, you know, there's not just a benefits thing. There's also landlords, councils. There's all sorts of people picking on us. And just want to say, yeah, just, you know, it's a nightmare. And my question to Ellen was, I suppose, because I have ADHD, so you might have already said this, but what can we do when you said like cause a rebellion? You know, I mean, I'm thinking, where do we steal the plans for the Death Star? You know, that's basically what I'm thinking.
How do we stop it? Handing over to Ellen for final words and summary, really, and we'll finish after Ellen. But it's, you know, how do we get the right networking information to put into the rebellion against the Death Star, shall we say? So anything you can point us to, Ellen, and please share it with us and we'll share it out to wider networks. Thank you so much for coming, Ellen, and all your wisdom and energy and ardent campaigning. Any support we can give, let us know. Over to Ellen for final words and anything you want to share at the end. Thank you so much for coming. Over.
I think the main thing I'd say is to support DPAC's work, or Crips Against Cuts as well, which is a younger iteration of DPAC, which is set up in some areas. We have called on local groups to organise local protests over Easter while MPs are are back from recess. If anyone's in London and wants to get involved in some London stuff, then if you've got, I don't know what the best way to share contact details is, but I'm happy for Phoenix and Mary Ellen to send, to give you my number and just message me to be involved in that. Otherwise, look on the DPAC website for where local protests are. I think the key is getting to MPs and trying to show them that it is in their best interests, because that seems to be how MPs think, in their best interests not to go along with this. So whether that's writing to them or meeting with them, I would encourage meeting where people are able to do that, or protesting if they have offices, or outside CLP meetings in a way that doesn't maybe attack the Labour Party members, but is trying to pull them on side. Where there are MPs, though, who are clearly pushing this, then we are going to be doing bigger protests targeting them. Yeah, I think we just have to make them see the strength of feeling there is against this. But also looking after each other is really important at this time, because so many people are going through multiple layers of shit.
Keep campaigning and send us what we can, and we'll network it. Thank you so much for coming, Ellen. Absolutely, such deep, informative information. Let's keep networking. We'll wrap it there for now, folks. Thank you very much, and find out more from the DPAC website, DPAC. Thank you.